Commander Vextel stood 12 feet tall on the broken ground of New Haven. His black armor gleamed in the pale sunlight that filtered through the smoky atmosphere. 4 powerful arms hung at his sides, each one capable of crushing steel. Red eyes scanned the ruins of what used to be a human city. The Titan DreadWalker had seen many dead worlds before. This was just another job, another planet to strip clean of useful materials before moving on to the next target. The hegemony had ordered his team to collect any valuable metals or technology left behind after the humans were wiped out 3 years ago. Vextel stepped over a pile of twisted metal that might have once been a vehicle. His heavy boots left deep prints in the ash-covered ground. Behind him, 6 other Titan warriors spread out across the wasteland. They carried scanning, equipment, and collection tools. Their job was simple: find anything worth taking and load it onto their ship. The human colony of New Haven had been home to 50,000 people. Now it was nothing but broken buildings and empty streets. The hegemony had done its work well. When humans tried to expand beyond their allowed boundaries, they were stopped permanently. Vextel activated his bioscanner. The device would detect any signs of life within a mile radius. He expected to find nothing. The sterilization process had been thorough. But as the scanner hummed to life, something impossible appeared on his display. A single life sign. Faint, but definitely there. Coming from Sector 7, about half a mile east of his current position, the massive warrior stopped walking. He stared at the scanner display, convinced it was malfunctioning. Nothing could be alive on New Haven. The orbital bombardment had been followed by chemical weapons designed to kill anything that breathed oxygen. Even the plants were dead. He tapped the scanner with one thick finger. The reading remained steady. 1 life form. Human genetic markers. Located in the ruins of what his map showed as a residential district, Vextel considered calling for backup. Protocol demanded that any survivors be reported immediately to Hegemony Command. But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the warrior's instinct to investigate before acting. He changed direction and headed toward Sector 7. His long strides covered ground quickly. As he walked, he tried to imagine what kind of human could have survived 3 years on a dead world. Perhaps someone with advanced medical equipment, or maybe a small group hiding in underground bunkers. The residential district had been hit hard during the bombardment. Most buildings were nothing but rubble and twisted metal. Vextel picked his way carefully through the debris. His scanner led him deeper into the maze of destruction. The life sign was getting stronger. Whatever lived here was close now. Vextel rounded the corner of a collapsed apartment building and stopped. In front of him sat a structure that didn't belong. Someone had built a shelter from pieces of wreckage. Sheets of metal formed walls. Plastic tarps kept out the rain. Power cables snaked across the ground, leading to a small fusion battery that still glowed with energy. The bioscanner was practically screaming now. The life form was inside that makeshift building. The Titan warrior approached slowly. His hand moved to the plasma rifle mounted on his back. Whatever human had survived this long might be dangerous. Desperate people did unpredictable things, but as he got closer, Vextel realized something was wrong. The shelter was too small. The entrance was barely 3 feet high. No adult human could live comfortably in such a tiny space. He knelt down beside the entrance and listened. At first, he heard only the wind blowing through the ruins. Then, faint but unmistakable, came another sound. A soft whimpering, kind of noise a small animal might make. Vextel pushed aside the tarp that served as a door and looked inside. What? He saw made his 4 hearts skip a beat. A human child sat in the middle of the shelter. An infant, probably no more than 6 months old. The baby was thin and dirty, but alive. Very much alive. Looked up at the massive alien face peering through the doorway and made a small gurgling sound. The Titan warrior stared in shock. This was impossible. How could a baby survive on a dead world? Who had been taking care of it? Where were its parents? As his eyes adjusted to the dim light inside the shelter, Vextel began to see answers to his questions. The walls were lined with equipment he recognized. Medical monitors, food synthesizers, water purification systems, recyclers. Someone had turned this tiny space into a complete life support facility. In one corner sat a cargo container marked with human writing. Jaxel's translation software identified the words, "Jake Morrison, Emergency Supplies." Next to the container lay the remains of an adult human. The body was old and dried out, but still wore the uniform of a colonial. Emergency responder. The story became clear. Someone had known the end was coming. They had prepared this shelter and gathered everything needed to keep one small life going after everyone else was gone. The person had probably died months ago, but their automated systems had continued working, feeding the baby, cleaning the air, keeping him warm and safe. Vextel reached into the shelter with one massive hand. The baby should have been terrified. Most creatures ran screaming from a Titan DreadWalker. But this tiny human showed no fear. Instead, he reached up with both small hands toward the alien's armored fingers. The touch was gentle, trusting. The baby's skin was soft and warm against the cold metal of Vextel's armor. Those little fingers tried to wrap around the Titan's thumb, not quite big enough to make it all the way around. Something strange happened in that moment, something Vextel had never experienced in his 100 years of military service. A feeling he couldn't name stirred in his chest. The baby looked directly into his red eyes and smiled. A real smile, full of innocent joy. The warrior found himself smiling back. Even though his face was hidden behind his battle mask, protocol was clear. All humans were to be eliminated on sight. No exceptions. No mercy. The hegemony had been very specific about this rule. But as Vextel looked down at the trusting infant in his hands, protocols seemed like something from another world. This wasn't an enemy soldier. This wasn't a threat to galactic peace. This was just a baby who had been abandoned and forgotten. A small life that had somehow found the strength to keep going when everything else had given up. Vextel made a decision that would change everything. He carefully lifted the baby out of the shelter. The child weighed almost nothing in his powerful arms. Jake, according to the identification tag scattered around the shelter. His name was Jake Morrison. The Titan warrior activated his communicator. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Kurdan, answered immediately. "Report, Commander. Have you found anything of value?" Vexel looked down at the baby in his arms. Jake had fallen asleep, tiny fists curled against the alien's armored chest. "Negative," Vexel lied. "Just scrap metal and worthless debris. Continue the salvage operation. I'm investigating some unusual energy readings. We'll report back in 6 hours? Understood, sir?" Vextel closed the communication link. He had just violated direct orders from Hegemony Command. He had lied to his own crew. He had committed treason against everything he had sworn to protect. And as he looked down at the sleeping baby in his arms, he found that he didn't care. Jake Morrison was going to live. Whatever it took, Vextel would make sure of that. Galaxy thought it had seen the last of humanity 3 years ago. The galaxy was wrong. Commander Vextel's private quarters aboard the Iron Talon had never been designed for a baby. The Titan warship was built for battle, not childcare. But somehow, over the past 3 weeks, the sterile military room had become something different. Something warmer. Jake Morrison sat in the middle of the floor, surrounded by makeshift toys that Vextel had created from spare parts. A ball made from soft padding, blocks cut from lightweight metal. Simple things that seemed to fascinate the human infant for hours. The massive alien warrior watched from his desk as Jake played. The baby had grown stronger since leaving New Haven. His skin had more color now. His eyes were brighter. The medical bay's food synthesizers produced perfect nutrition for human development. And Jake was thriving. But caring for a baby was harder than fighting a war, Vextel had learned. This the hard way. Human infants needed constant attention. They cried when hungry, wet, tired, or sometimes for no reason at all. They required cleaning multiple times per day. They needed to be held and comforted when frightened. The Titan warrior had never held anything so fragile in his life. His hands were designed to crush enemies and operate heavy weapons. Now he found himself learning to change diapers with the same precision he once used to assemble plasma rifles. Jake made a happy gurgling sound and reached for one of his toys. Vexthel smiled behind his face mask. The baby was getting faster, stronger, more aware of his surroundings. Sometimes Vexthel caught Jake watching him with intense curiosity, as if the child was studying everything about his alien guardian. A soft chime indicated someone was at his door. Vexthel quickly scooped Jake up and placed him in a specially modified storage container lined with soft materials. It wasn't perfect, but it would keep the baby hidden and comfortable. "Enter," Vexthel called out. Lieutenant Commander Kurdan stepped into the room. The second in command was shorter than Vexthel, but just as heavily built. His gray armor was marked with battle scars from dozens of campaigns.
Ice.
His yellow eyes swept the room suspiciously. "Commander, we need to discuss the crew's concerns." "What concerns?" Vexthel kept his voice steady, but his hearts were beating faster. "You've been acting strangely since we left New Haven, disappearing for hours at a time, refusing to join the officers' meals. The crew is starting to ask questions." From inside the container, Jake made a soft cooing sound. Vexthel coughed loudly. "To cover the noise, I've been dealing with equipment problems. Nothing that concerns the crew." Kurdan's eyes narrowed. He had served with Vexthel for 20 years. They had fought side by side in the Outer Rim Wars. Kurdan knew when his commander was lying. "What kind of equipment problems?" Another sound came from the container. This time it was louder, more clearly the noise of a living creature. Kurdan's hand moved to his sidearm. "Commander, what is in that container?" Vexthel realized his deception was over. He could lie to Hegemony Command over long-range communications, but he couldn't fool his oldest friend face to face. Slowly, he reached over and opened the container. Jake Morrison looked up at both aliens with bright, curious eyes. He was completely unafraid, as if meeting new giant warriors was a normal part of his day. Kurdan stared in shock. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Finally, he managed to speak. "That's a human." "Yes." "A human baby." "Yes, a live human baby that you brought onto a hegemony warship." "Yes." Kurdan's face went through several different expressions. Shock gave way to anger, then to confusion, then back to anger again. He drew his plasma pistol and pointed it. "At the container, Commander? You know what I have to do? Hegemony law is clear. All humans must be eliminated immediately." Jake chose that moment to reach up toward Kurdan with both small hands. The baby smiled and made happy babbling sounds, completely unaware of the weapon pointed at him. "Look at him," Vexthel said quietly. "Really look at him. It's just a baby. Kurdan, he's done nothing wrong. He poses no threat to anyone. The law doesn't make exceptions for age." But Kurdan's voice was less certain now. The plasma pistol wavered slightly. Jake continued reaching toward the lieutenant commander. His tiny fingers grasped at the air, trying to touch the strange new person. The baby's eyes were wide with innocent wonder. "He's been alone on a dead world for 3 years, Vexthel continued. "Kept alive by machines that someone built before they died. He doesn't even know what he is. To him, we're just big creatures who might be friends." Kurdan looked down at Jake for a long moment. The baby grabbed the alien's thick finger and held on tight. Such a small grip, but somehow it felt heavier than any weapon. "The crew will have to know," Kurdan said finally, lowering his pistol. "You can't keep this secret much longer." "No, and Command will find out eventually. They always do." "I know that too. So what's your plan, old friend? Because I can't see any way this ends well for any of us." Vexthel lifted Jake out of the container and held him carefully. The baby immediately started playing with the commander's armor, fascinated by the different textures and surfaces. "Don't have a plan yet, but I couldn't leave him there to die. Something about him, I can't explain it, is different from what we were told about humans." Over the following days, word of Jake's presence spread quietly through the ship. First, the crew was divided. Some wanted to follow regulations and report the human immediately. Others were curious about the strange little creature their commander had adopted. Engineer Thexmar was the first to openly help. She created a proper crib for Jake from lightweight metal and soft padding. Then she built toys designed for his small hands. When questioned, she claimed she was just testing new fabrication techniques. Weapons Master Braytok was harder to convince. The scarred veteran had lost friends to human expansion fleets years ago. But when Jake crawled over to him during a senior staff meeting and pulled himself up using the warrior's leg armor, something changed. The baby looked up at Braytok with complete trust and smiled. "He's not afraid," Braytok muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Every creature in the galaxy knows to fear a Titan warrior, but this little human just sees a friend. As the weeks passed, Jake's development amazed everyone who met him. The baby learned to recognize different crew members by their voices. He responded to simple commands in both human speech and Titan frequency communications. Most impressive of all, he seemed to understand the ship's daily routines and adapted to them perfectly. Dr. Valen, the ship's medical officer, ran discreet scans on Jake when Vextel wasn't looking. The results were fascinating. Da-da-da-da-da. The baby's brain activity was far higher than expected for his age. His muscle development was accelerated. His sensory processing was remarkably advanced. "Commander," she reported privately, "this human infant is developing at a rate that exceeds our projections by significant margins. If these patterns continue, his adult capabilities could be ... substantial." Jake also began showing problem-solving, skills that surprised everyone. When a maintenance panel came loose in Vexel's quarters, the baby crawled over and actually tried to help fix it. His tiny hands couldn't manipulate the tools, but he clearly understood what needed to be done. Breakthrough came during a routine patrol mission. Pirates had been reported in the sector, and the Iron Talon was investigating. During the search, a critical power coupling failed in the ship's defensive systems. The failure was in a narrow maintenance shaft that even the smallest Titan couldn't access. Jake, who had been crawling around the engineering deck under the Smar's watchful eye, disappeared into the shaft before anyone could stop him. 20 minutes later, he emerged carrying the broken coupling in his mouth like a proud puppy. Dexmar stared at the damaged part, then at the baby who had retrieved it. "He knew exactly what was wrong," she whispered. Somehow he understood the problem and found the solution. That night, Vextel held Jake as the baby fell asleep in his arms. The tiny human felt so light, so vulnerable. But Vextel was beginning to understand that appearances could be deceiving Jake. Morrison was much more than just a human baby. It was proof that everything the hegemony believed about humanity might be wrong, and that realization terrified the veteran commander more than any enemy he had ever faced. Jake Morrison was now 18 months old and walking everywhere. The small human toddler had become the unofficial mascot of the Iron Talon. He wandered the ship's corridors with confidence, greeting crew members like old friends. His bright laughter echoed through sections that had never heard such sounds before. Commander Vextel watched Jake play in the main engineering bay. The child had learned to climb on everything, treating the massive machinery like playground equipment. Engineer Dexmar had given up trying to keep him away from the equipment. Instead, she had child-proofed the dangerous areas and let Jake explore. "He understands how things work," Dexmar explained to Vextel. "Watch him." Jake was examining a power distribution panel. His small fingers traced the connection pathways while he made soft humming sounds. To most observers, it looked like random play. But Vexel had learned to pay attention to Jake's behavior. The toddler stopped humming and pointed at a specific section of the panel. He looked up at Dexmar and made urgent babbling sounds, clearly trying to communicate something important. "What is it, little one?" Dexmar knelt down beside him. Jake kept pointing and babbling. He grabbed the engineer's hand and pulled her toward a diagnostic station. His meaning was clear. Something was wrong with the panel. Dexmar ran a full system check. Her eyes widened as the results appeared on her screen. "There's a microfracture in the primary coupling. It's barely detectable, but it would have caused a complete power failure within the next few hours." She looked down at Jake, who was now playing with his toy blocks as if nothing had happened. "How did you know that?" Jake just smiled and continued building his tower. This wasn't the first time the child had surprised them. 2 weeks ago, he had somehow opened a locked storage compartment that had been sealed for months. Inside, they found spare parts that were desperately needed for repairs. When asked how he did it, Jake just laughed and ran away. Lieutenant Commander Curtin had initially been skeptical about keeping Jake aboard, but even he had to admit the human was proving useful. The child's small size allowed him to access areas of the ship that were impossible for adult Titans to reach. His natural curiosity led him to discover problems before they became serious. Weapons. Master Braytok had become Jake's unofficial protector. The scarred veteran followed the toddler around the ship, making sure he stayed safe while exploring. At first, it seemed like an odd pairing, the fierce warrior and the tiny human. But Jake had a way of bringing out unexpected gentleness in everyone. He's changing us, Braytok admitted to Vexel one evening. I've been a soldier for 80 years. I've killed more enemies than I care to count. But when that little human looks at me and smiles, I remember what it feels like too. Protect something innocent. Jake had also learned to communicate in ways that amazed the crew. Spoke simple words in both human language and basic Titan phrases. More impressive, he had started using the ship's computer terminals. His tiny hands could barely reach the controls, but he had figured out how to access basic functions. Dr. Valen continued her secret studies of Jake's development. The results were becoming impossible to ignore. The child's learning rate was extraordinary. His problem-solving abilities exceeded those of some adult crew members. His spatial awareness was perfect. He never got lost on the massive warship. Commander, she reported to Vexel privately, I need to show you something. They went to her medical lab, where Jake was playing with a puzzle Vexmar had built for him. The puzzle was designed to test three-dimensional thinking and required manipulation of multiple moving parts to solve. This puzzle is typically used to evaluate Titan cadets, Dr. Vialan explained. The average time to solve it is 45 minutes. The fastest recorded time by an adult is 22 minutes. Jake picked up the puzzle and examined it for it. Moment. His small fingers moved quickly, rotating sections and sliding pieces into place. Within 8 minutes, he had completely solved it. Then he took it apart and solved it again, even faster. He's not just smart, Dr. Valen whispered. He's operating on a completely different level. His neural pathways are developing in ways we've never seen before. But Jake's most remarkable ability was his effect on the crew's morale. The Iron Talon had always been a cold, efficient military vessel. Now it felt different. Crew members smiled more often. They worked together better. They took pride in keeping their sections clean and safe for their small companion. The change became most apparent during a crisis. The Iron Talon was patrolling near the contested zone when they detected a distress signal. A hegemony transport ship had been attacked by pirates and was drifting powerless near an asteroid field. Captain Vextel ordered an immediate rescue operation as they approached the damaged transport. Their own ship was ambushed. 3 pirate vessels emerged from behind the asteroids, weapons blazing. The Iron Talon was a powerful warship, but the surprise attack had damaged their defensive systems. Shields at 60% and falling, reported the tactical officer. Return fire, Vextel ordered. Target their engines. The battle was fierce. Plasma bolts filled the space between the ships while both sides maneuvered for advantage. But the Iron Talon was outnumbered, and their damaged systems were failing under the constant bombardment. Primary power coupling is overloading, Vexmar shouted over the noise of exploding consoles. If it fails, we'll lose all defensive capabilities. Can you fix it? The coupling is in the tertiary maintenance shaft. It's too small for any of us to reach. Vextel immediately thought of Jake. The toddler was the only one small enough to access that area. But sending a child into a combat zone was unthinkable. Jake appeared at Vexel's side, having somehow made his way to the bridge during the battle. He tugged on the commander's leg armor and pointed toward the engineering section. His expression was serious, as if he understood the danger they were all in. No, Vextel said firmly. It's too dangerous. Jake shook his head and pointed again, made urgent sounds, clearly trying to explain that he could help. Another devastating hit rocked the ship. Sparks flew from control panels as systems failed throughout the vessel. "Shields at 20%, the tactical officer reported. "We can't take much more of this." Jake pulled harder on Vexel's armor. The child's eyes were filled with determination, not fear. He somehow understood that the ship, his home, and his family was in mortal danger. "I'll go with him," DreadWalker volunteered. "I can guide him to the right location and keep him safe." Vexel looked down at Jake, who nodded as if he understood the conversation. The toddler was ready to risk his life to save his adopted family. "Do it," Vexel decided. DreadWalker and Jake disappeared into the ship's maintenance tunnels. Minutes passed like hours as the battle raged above them. The pirate ships pressed their attack, sensing victory. Then, suddenly, the Iron Talon's defensive systems came back online. Shields strengthened, weapons recharged. The tide of battle turned in an instant. "Power coupling is stable," Dexmar reported with amazement in her voice. With their full capabilities restored, the Iron Talon made short work of the pirate vessels. 2 were destroyed outright. The third fled into hyperspace. Jake emerged from the maintenance shaft covered in grease but smiling proudly. He had crawled through spaces no adult could navigate and performed repairs that saved everyone aboard DreadWalker. Picked up the small human and held him high. "This little warrior just saved all our lives." The crew erupted in cheers. They had always known Jake was special, but now they understood he was truly one of them. A member of their family who would risk everything to protect those he loved. As Vexel watched his crew celebrate their small hero, he realized something important had changed. They were no longer just following orders or maintaining discipline. They were fighting for something worth protecting. But their celebration was interrupted by an urgent communication from Hegemony Command. Admiral Kethfer's cold voice filled the bridge. "Iron Talon, you are ordered to return to Station Prime immediately. Your extended patrol mission has attracted unwanted attention. Command has questions that require immediate answers." Vexel felt his heart sink. The net was closing around them. Soon they would have to face the consequences of their choices. Jake seemed to sense the tension. He walked over to Vexel and took the commander's massive hand in his tiny ones. The child looked up with trust and confidence, as if he knew everything would be all right. Vexel hoped Jake's faith wasn't misplaced. The Iron Talon docked at Station Prime 3 days later. Jake Morrison, now 2 years old, pressed his face against the window of Commander Vexel's quarters. The massive space station stretched out before them like a metal city floating in the stars. Thousands of ships came and went from its docking bays. Jake had never seen anything so big. "Stay close to me," Vexel told him. "This place is different from our ship. There are people here who might not understand how special you are." Jake nodded seriously. He had learned to recognize when the adults around him were worried. The entire crew of the Iron Talon had been acting strange since they received orders to return. Even DreadWalker, who usually made Jake laugh with funny faces, had been quiet and tense. Vexel tried to hide Jake in his quarters, but the space station's security was too thorough. Within 2 hours of docking, maintenance crews found the toddler. Playing in the ship's engineering section, word spread quickly through the station's communication networks. Admiral Kethfer arrived with a full security detail. The tall, silver-armored Titan moved through the Iron Talon's corridors like a storm cloud. His red eyes burned with cold anger as he confronted Vexel on the bridge. "Commander, you will explain why there is a live human aboard your vessel." "Sir, I can explain everything. You'd better. Harboring enemy survivors is treason. Penalty is death." Jake wandered onto the bridge at that moment, completely unaware of the tension in the room. He saw the new aliens in fancy armor and walked over to investigate. Admiral Kethfer stared down at the small human with disgust. "This is what you've been hiding? A human whelp?" Jake looked up at the Admiral with curious eyes. The child showed no fear, even though Kethfer was the most intimidating Titan most people had ever seen. Instead, Jake smiled and reached out to touch the Admiral's shiny armor. "Fascinating," came a new voice from the doorway. Dr. Wysick, the Hegemony's chief scientist, entered the bridge. She was smaller than the warriors, but her presence commanded immediate respect. Commander Vextel, how long has this specimen been in your custody? 2 years, ma'am? Dr. Wysick knelt down to Jake's level. Da. The child immediately walked over to her, unafraid. He babbled something in his mixture of human words and Titan phrases, pointing at various things around the bridge. Remarkable. He's attempting communication using multiple languages. At his age, most human children can barely speak their native tongue. Dr. Admiral Kethfer interrupted. We're not here to study this creature. We're here to eliminate a security threat. It's actually, Admiral, I think we should study him very carefully before making any decisions. Jake, meanwhile, had discovered the bridge's main computer terminal. His small hands moved over the controls with surprising skill. Within moments, he had accessed the ship's status display and was pointing at various readings while making excited sounds. He's reading the ship's systems, Dr. Wysick observed with amazement. A 2-year-old human is interpreting complex technical data. Lieutenant Commander Kurdan stepped forward. Doctor, you should know that Jake has been instrumental in maintaining our ship's operations. He saved our lives on multiple occasions. Explain. Engineer Thexmar joined them. The human can access areas of the ship that we cannot reach. His size allows him to perform repairs in spaces too small for adult Titans. More importantly, he seems to instinctively understand how mechanical systems work. Show me, Dr. Wysick demanded. They moved to the engineering section, where Thexmar presented Jake with a complex puzzle box designed to test spatial reasoning skills. Jake examined it for a few seconds, then quickly manipulated the various components to solve it. He completed the puzzle in less than 5 minutes. The average Titan cadet requires 30 minutes to solve that puzzle, Dr. Wysick muttered. Some never solve it at all. She pulled out a portable scanner and ran it over Jake while he played. The child didn't mind the attention. He had grown. Used to Dr. Valen's medical examinations aboard the Iron Talon, the results made Dr. Wysick gasp audibly. Admiral, you need to see this. Admiral Kethfer looked at the scanner readings with growing shock. These numbers cannot be correct. Run the scan again. 3 more scans produced identical results. Jake's neural activity was operating at levels that exceeded most adult Titans. His cognitive development was advancing at an impossible rate. His genetic markers suggested capabilities that wouldn't fully manifest until he reached maturity. Does this mean? Admiral Kethfer asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. It means everything we believed about human limitations was wrong, Dr. Wysick replied. If this child's development is typical for his species, then humans possess capabilities we never suspected. Jake had wandered away from the adults and was now examining a broken communication relay. He poked at the damaged components, making soft, thoughtful sounds. Then he began rearranging the pieces, somehow knowing exactly how they should fit together. The relay has been broken for weeks, Thexmar said quietly. Our repair crews couldn't figure out how to fix it. Jake's small fingers worked with surprising precision. Within minutes, the communication system came back online. Status lights blinked green across the control panel. Impossible, Admiral Kethfer whispered. Word of Jake's abilities spread throughout Station Prime within hours. Scientists, military officers, and government officials all wanted to see the remarkable human child. Jake took the attention in stride, treating each new visitor like a potential friend. But the political implications were causing chaos in the hegemony's leadership. Emergency council meetings were called. Classified reports flew between star systems. The question everyone was asking was simple but terrifying. If one human child could do this, what could 1 million adult humans accomplish? Dr. Wysick convinced the council to delay any decision about Jake's fate while she conducted extensive testing. For 3 days, she put him through every cognitive assessment in her database. Each test produced results that challenged fundamental assumptions about intelligence and development. Jake seemed to enjoy the tests. He treated them like games, laughing when he solved difficult problems and asking for more challenges when he finished quickly. His learning rate is exponential, Dr. Wysick reported to the council. He's not just memorizing information. He's understanding complex principles and applying them to new situations. At this rate of development, his adult Capabilities will be extraordinary. Council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If Jake was representative of human potential, then the hegemony had made a terrible mistake 3 years ago. On the fourth day, Jack did something that shocked everyone. He was being tested in a secure laboratory when he suddenly stopped playing and walked to the communication terminal. His small hands moved over the controls with purpose. A moment later, the main display screen activated, showing a star chart of the local sector. Jake pointed to a specific system and began speaking. Not the babbling sounds he usually made, but clear, precise words in perfect hegemony standard. "My people are there," he said, his young voice carrying absolute certainty. "They're hiding, but they're alive. They're waiting for someone to find them." The adults in the room stared in stunned silence. Jake had never been taught advanced hegemony standard. He had never seen detailed star charts. But somehow, he knew. Things that should have been impossible for him to know. Dr. Wasik approached the terminal and examined the coordinates Jake had indicated. That system was supposed to be uninhabited. "Our surveys showed no signs of life." "Your surveys were wrong," Jake said simply. "Humans are very good at hiding when they need to." Admiral Kethfer felt a chill run through his 4 hearts. If the child was right, if there were human survivors scattered throughout the galaxy, then everything the hegemony thought they knew about the war was false. "We need to investigate these coordinates immediately," Dr. Wasik urged. "No," Admiral Kethfer said firmly. "We need to report this to the High Council. This is far beyond our authority to handle." Jake walked over to Commander Vextel and took his massive hand. "It's going to be okay," the child said with surprising maturity. "People are scared because they don't understand. But they'll learn. They have to learn." Vextel looked down at the small human who had changed his life so completely. Jake had grown from a helpless infant into something unprecedented. Something that could change the galaxy's future. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for that change. The Hegemony High Council chamber was the most impressive room on Station Prime. Massive screens covered the walls, showing star maps of their empire. Hundreds of council members sat in curved rows representing dozens of different alien species. They had gathered to decide the fate of one small human child. Jake Morrison, now 3 years old, stood in the center of the chamber, showed no fear as thousands of eyes stared down at him. Commander Vextel stood beside him, ready to protect his adopted son no matter what the council decided. Admiral Kethfer addressed the assembly. "Council members, we are here to determine what should be done with this human survivor. Dr. Wasik will present her findings." The chief scientist stepped forward with her data tablets. "Honored Council, my tests have revealed capabilities that challenge everything we thought we knew about human intelligence. This child's cognitive development exceeds our highest projections. His problem-solving abilities surpass those of many adult members of our own species." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Many council members had fought in the human war 3 years ago. They remembered humans as violent, unpredictable creatures driven by emotion rather than logic. Furthermore, Dr. Wasik continued, the subject has demonstrated knowledge that he could not have acquired through normal learning. He has shown awareness of star charts he has never seen, technical systems he has never studied, and even locations of other human survivors. Council Leader Thexkel, an ancient being with silver skin and 4 eyes, leaned forward. "Dr. Wasik, are you suggesting this child possesses some form of inherited memory? I'm suggesting that human neural development operates on principles we don't understand. This child may represent the true potential of his species." Admiral Kethfer stood up angrily. "Council Leader, we cannot allow sentiment to cloud our judgment. Hegemony law is clear. All humans must be eliminated for the safety of the galaxy. This creature, regardless of its abilities, remains a threat." "What threat?" called out a voice from the gallery. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Jake. The 3-year-old had climbed onto a chair so he could be seen better. His clear voice carried throughout the massive chamber. "What threat do I pose to any of you?" Jake asked. His words were spoken in perfect hegemony standard, with no trace of childish pronunciation. "I've never hurt anyone. I've only tried to help." The council members stared in shock. Most had never heard a human speak their language, let alone with such clarity and intelligence. Jake continued speaking. You're afraid of my people because you think we want to fight you, but that's not true. Humans just want to live and explore, and learn new things. We wanted to be friends with all of you. Your species attacked our colonies, Admiral Kethfer accused. No, Jake replied firmly. You attacked our colonies first. We were just trying to defend ourselves. The chamber erupted. In angry voices, some council members shouted denials. Others demanded proof. Through it all, Jake stood calmly, waiting for the noise to die down. Council leader Thexkull called for order. Child, these are serious accusations. You have evidence to support your claims? Jake nodded and walked to the chamber's main computer. Terminal. His small hands moved over the controls with practiced skill. Within moments, he had accessed files that should have been beyond his clearance level. I've been studying your databases, Jake explained as data filled the massive screens. The real records are all here, hidden in classified files that most people never see. The screens showed battle reports, communication logs, and military orders from 3 years ago. But these weren't the sanitized versions that had been released to the public. These were the original, unedited files that told a very different story. Dr. Wyzik studied the data with growing amazement. These files show that human colonies were attacked without provocation. The humans only fought back after their peaceful settlements were destroyed. Impossible, Admiral Kethfer snarled. Those files are classified beyond your access level, not beyond mine, Jake said simply. I told you, humans are very good at hiding and finding things when we need to. More data appeared on the screens. Internal hegemony communications that revealed the truth about the human war. Fear among the leadership about human expansion rates, concerns about human adaptability and intelligence. Orders to eliminate the human threat before it could fully develop. You didn't attack us because we were violent, Jake said, his young voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. You attacked us because you were afraid we might become better than you. The silence that followed was deafening. Council members looked at each other with growing unease. Many of them had believed they were fighting a righteous war against dangerous aggressors. Now they were seeing proof that they had been lied to. Council leader Thexkull spoke slowly. If these files are authentic, then we have committed genocide against an innocent species. Files are real, Dr. Wyzik confirmed after running verification checks. And there's more. According to these records, there are human survivors. Scattered throughout the galaxy, small groups that escaped the initial attacks and have been hiding ever since. Jake pointed to specific coordinates on the star map. They're waiting. They know I'm here. They know that maybe, finally, someone is willing to listen. Admiral Kethfer drew his weapon. Enough of this deception. One way or another, this threat ends now. But before he could fire, every weapon in the chamber suddenly powered down. Security systems went offline. Even the lights dimmed as Jake somehow took control of the station's computer network. I'm not a threat, Jake said, his voice now carrying through the chamber's speakers as well. But I'm not helpless either, none of us are. The lights came back on, systems returned to normal. Jake had demonstrated his power and then chosen not to use it against them. You could have hurt us. Council leader Thexkull observed. What, you didn't? Hurting people doesn't solve problems, Jake replied. It just makes more problems. Commander Vextel stepped forward. Council leader, I've spent 3 years with this child. You show nothing but curiosity, kindness, and a desire to help others. If this is what humans truly are, then we made a terrible mistake. The council debated for hours. Some members, led by Admiral Kethfer, insisted that all humans must still be eliminated for security reasons. Others argued that Jake's intelligence and peaceful nature proved humans deserved a chance to live. Finally, council leader Thexkull called for a vote. All in favor of allowing this human child to live under supervised protection? Lights flashed across the chamber as votes were recorded. The count was close, but Jake's supporters won by a narrow margin. The council has decided, Thexkull announced. The human child will be placed under the protection of Dr. Wyzik for continued study. Commander Vextel will remain as his guardian. Jake smiled and hugged Vextel's massive leg. Thank you, he said to the council. You won't regret this decision. But the real change had already begun. Word of Jake's abilities and the truth about the human war spread throughout hegemony space. Other commanders began reporting unusual readings on former human worlds. Scientists requested permission to investigate the coordinates. Jake had provided. Dr. Wasik established a research facility where Jake could continue learning and growing. But it wasn't a prison. It was a place where humans and aliens could meet safely and begin to understand each other. Within a year, the first group of human survivors came out of hiding. They were cautious at first, but Jake's presence gave them hope. More followed. Then more. 5 years after Vextel found an abandoned baby in a box, Jake had become something unprecedented. At 8 years old, he served as an unofficial ambassador between species. He helped establish peaceful contact protocols. He solved disputes that had lasted for decades. Most importantly, he had proven that humans and aliens could be friends. Vextel watched Jake teaching a group of young Titan cadets how to solve complex engineering problems. The human child was patient and encouraging, helping each student understand the concepts at their own pace. "You were right to save him," Dr. Wasik said, joining Vextel at the observation window.
"This changed everything."
"No," Vexel replied, thinking back to that day on New Haven when a tiny hand had reached out to him without fear. "He just showed us what was possible when we choose compassion over fear." Jake looked up and waved at his guardian. The boy who had been abandoned on a dead world was now helping build a better future for the entire galaxy. And it all started because one warrior chose to save a life instead of following orders.